This presentation is being made by a Consumer Financial Protection Bureau representative on behalf of the Bureau. It does not constitute legal interpretation, guidance, or advice of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Any opinions or views stated by the presenter are the presenter's own and may not represent the Bureau's views. Now, I will turn this over to Desmond Brown, who will begin this event. Here you are, Desmond.
Thank you, Robin. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Desmond Brown. I am the Assistant Director for Consumer Education here at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Thank you so much again for joining us this afternoon. We have three very interesting presentations to share with you today. But before I introduce the speakers, let me take a moment to share a little about CFPB's overall consumer education efforts. Core to the Bureau's responsibility for protecting consumers is our commitment to be a constant and reliable source for timely financial education resources and skill-building tools to help consumers manage their financial lives. We seek to educate and empower consumers so they can be prepared to effectively manage their financial goals. Never has our work been more visible or more important than right now during our nation's response to COVID-19. The information and resources we are providing to help consumers protect and manage their finances during this time serves as an excellent example of our work. Our staff within the Financial Education Office does a lot more. We work to ensure consumers have opportunities to build skills and knowledge and confidence to improve their financial well-being. We also work to strengthen the country's infrastructure for delivering effective financial education. As part of that infrastructure work, our efforts are grounded in a comprehensive framework for measuring financial well-being. In 2015, our Office of Financial Education put forth a research-backed and consumer-driven definition of financial well-being, describing it as a state of being whereupon an individual can do three things. One, they can fully meet current and ongoing financial obligations. Two, they can feel secure in their financial future. And three, they're able to make choices that allow them to have some enjoyment in their lives. We developed a scale designed to allow practitioners and researchers to accurately and consistently quantify and therefore observe financial well-being. We have also released a questionnaire so consumers can take stock of their own financial well-being, and I encourage you to take a look at this scale. Unfortunately, some of the most vulnerable consumers face unique challenges and barriers to improving their financial well-being. That is why we have the special population offices that you will hear from today. The offices of Older Americans, Service Member Affairs, and Community Affairs. These offices bring special attention to the unique needs of consumers within the communities they represent. They also work to bring the voices from those communities into the work of the Bureau. In our first presentation today, you'll hear from Jim Rice, our Assistant Director for Service Member Affairs, and James Marone on his team. They will present key findings and takeaways from the Bureau's recent report, Financially Fit, Comparing the Credit Records of Young Service Members and Civilians. As you know, credit records is an important and significant factor in an individual's financial well-being. And for service members, it's also very important in their ability to maintain security clearance and in some cases move up in military service. Jim and James will share how credit records change during the individual's military service. Our Office for Older Americans works to identify interventions that can help individuals, families, and communities to counter elder financial exploitation and fraud. The office studied one approach many communities have adopted in this effort, that being elder fraud prevention and response networks. In our second presentation, Michael Herden will touch upon findings from that research and highlight resources the office has created to help local communities and stakeholders create or enhance such networks. Finally, Daniel Dowd Ramirez, our Assistant Director for the Office of Community Affairs, will talk about our latest look at the needs of traditionally underserved consumers. They'll be highlighting the Bureau's recent research on credit builder loans. They will talk about how financial educators, financial institutions, and others use these products to help consumers manage their financial lives. And so with that, let me now turn things over to Jim Rice, who will give the first presentation. Jim, thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Desmond, and thanks all of you for joining us this afternoon. I'm Jim Rice, and I lead the Office of Servicemember Affairs. One of the missions in our office is to educate and empower service members to make better informed decisions about consumer financial products and their handling of those. We get our information in development of our various tools from various sources, meeting with individuals, meeting with members of the military, family members, reviewing surveys. But we made an attempt last fall, we decided last fall, to take the Consumer Credit Panel, which is a 1 in 48 measure of all the consumer credit out there, and match that against the Servicemembers Civil Relief Act, the SCRA database, which shows active duty service members. We determine how they were using credit measured against a population of civilians who never joined the military. Our goal in that was to ensure that decision makers have clear insight into how military families interact with financial products. Today's Financially Fit, Comparing Credit Records of Young Service Members and Civilians is a result of an outstanding effort initially formed last fall by Dr. Susan Carter, who is an assistant professor of economics at West Point, really driven home by Dr. Jim Marone, who's going to run through some of that report that we're posting to our website this afternoon. We hope you'll get a chance to download that report, take a good look at it, take that information in, and use that information to make important decisions regarding how military families interact. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Jim Marone to run through some of the highlights of the report.
Oh, gosh. Okay. Thank you, Jim. So I am Jim Marone. I'm a researcher in the Office of Servicemember Affairs, and as Jim mentioned, we are excited to make public our new report today. It should be downloadable after this presentation. And this report analyzes service members' credit histories. I'm going to discuss how the report and research more generally help OSA in its mission. So a key goal of this new report was to determine how service members interact with credit products. We know that service members' financial profiles, just like anyone else's, change over the course of their careers. And this slide illustrates just one possible path that a young enlistee's credit record might follow. So we see that they join the military, maybe at age 18, and soon after they open an auto loan and a credit card. Then later, as they get promoted, they may start a family and they move off base and they get a mortgage. And then later, after they exit the military, we observe some veterans taking out student loans as they go back to school. And of course, people are paying off debt that they accrued during service. So understanding the use of credit products over the military life cycle helps OSA in its mission, which, as you heard earlier, is to educate and empower military families. The report that we posted today was our attempt to answer the question, how do young consumers build credit histories? And the answer is that it depends on when they join the military and how long they serve. So we're able to observe a de-identified set of consumers from the time that they become legal adults at age 18 until their mid-20s. And this slide shows an illustration of some possible different trajectories that different consumers may take in their credit records based on the different lengths of military service. So first we see a civilian who never joins the military. By age 24, they may have a student loan and a credit card. Next, we see someone who enlists at age 18 and serves for 4 years. And by the time they're 24, they may have an auto loan from back when they were in active duty and a student loan from after they left the military. And finally, we see an enlistee who joins at 18 and stays in the military all the way through our observation window. So by the time they're 24, they may have an auto loan and a mortgage, but no student loan. So overall, we observe a lot of different trajectories in our data, and our report is a way to classify those patterns into general trends that help us identify when service members make major financial decisions and what those decisions are. So as a result of the analyses, we have a few key takeaways. First of all, we have the benefit of this really great data, which contains almost 300,000 de-identified credit records linked to military service histories. So we're able to observe people from the very beginning of their credit history, and indeed most service members who join at young ages have no credit history prior to joining the military. As the previous slide suggested, one major pattern in these data is that service members use different credit products from civilians. Service members are more likely to take out auto loans or open credit cards, but they're less likely to have a student loan or to have an account go to collections like a utility bill or a medical bill. And finally, the data provide two good predictors of what someone's credit record is going to look like by the time that they're 24. The first is the age at which they join the military, and the second, which is the best predictor in our data, is the amount of time that they serve. This slide provides an example of how service members and civilians differ in their usage of credit products. So the slide shows a bar graph. The dark green represents people who joined the military at some point before they turned 24. The light green represents people who never joined the military. And you can see in the first pair of bars that 73% of service members take out an auto loan before they turn 24 years old, compared to just 39% of civilians. And conversely, the bars showing student loans show that just 26% of service members have a student loan at some point before they turn 24, compared to 45% of civilians. So it's very clear from this graph that service members and civilians indeed have different needs for different types of credit products. So I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into auto loans to show you some more results of the report. Another pattern we notice is the timing of loans. So this slide shows a line graph, and each line represents a group of people who join the military at different ages. The darkest green line represents people who join by age 19. The lighter green line is people who join at age 20 or 21. The blue line, people who join at age 22 or 23. And the gray line is a comparison of people who don't join the military at all. And what we see, and I've noted it in the circles now, is that the service member lines tick up around the age at which that group joins the military. So on average, future service members, before they join, look a lot like civilians in terms of their auto loan borrowing habits. But then after they join the military, they are more likely to take on an auto loan, probably more likely to require a car. This slide plots the same data in a different way. So now the gray line is still the civilian comparison group, exactly the same line as on the previous slide, but the green lines split up everyone who joined the military by age 19 based on how long they served. So the darker the green line, the longer they were in service. And I've noted in the circles here this important pattern in this graph, which is that these lines start to kink downward around the age at which those service members leave the military. So that's telling us that people are closing out their auto loans soon after they leave the service. We can also see that the very faintest green line, which is people who spend less than 1 year in the military, is very similar to the civilian line. So these people are not staying in active duty long enough to start taking out auto loans in any sort of large number. So we're seeing a very strong relationship between military service and auto loans, which tells us that enlistment and separation are key points at which young service members are making important decisions about taking on debt and paying it off. And those decisions could affect their credit record for several years. So hopefully this little taste of the report has shown that young service members' credit histories evolve differently from civilians in important ways, and that these observations are important in helping OSA create financial literacy tools that are tailored to military families' needs. As I just showed you, this research helps identify points in the career when major credit-related decisions are made. It also shows the typical products, loan balances that service members take out, and it can be useful to identify subpopulations that do or do not use products, or that do or do not have delinquencies and defaults. And those observations are important in helping OSA determine which subpopulations may particularly benefit from more educational tools and information. We also hope that this report will provide a foundation for OSA and other organizations to increase our understanding of military families' financial well-being through future research. So if you're interested in more results from the report, and of course we hope you are, we hope you'll download the full report, or we also have an abbreviated summary available on the same page. So you can explore in more detail how young veterans' credit records change over time, and also keep an eye out for what we hope will be a follow-on report detailing how young veterans' credit records evolve in the first year after they leave the service. So thanks for listening. I'm now going to turn over the presentation to Mr. Michael Herndon from the Office of Older Americans.
Hi, thank you, Jim. I'm Michael Herndon with the CFPB's Office for Older Americans. The Office for Older Americans undertakes works to help generally in two areas. One is the effort to prevent harm by helping older adults avoid frauds and financial exploitation, such as taking advantage of someone with cognitive limitations. The other area is financial decisions older adults make, such as thinking about when to claim Social Security. Under these areas of prevent harm, we've been working to help create and strengthen elder fraud prevention and response networks. So let's start by how our office defines a network. We say that networks are sustained because they are not just one-time events or meetings. We think of them as largely voluntary efforts as opposed to mandated interagency protocols that may exist. These networks are often known by a variety of names, including task force, coalition, or financial abuse specialist team. We see networks as those engaged in a variety of activities from education to cross-professional training. To get an understanding of what role with networks could be, we started by conducting research. In 2016, we released a report and recommendations. We also released a resource guide for elder financial exploitation prevention and response networks. The covers are shown here. In this study, we found that networks do benefit older adults, the professionals, and the communities. One way they do this is to improve financial response to financial exploitation. They do this through helping members of the network gain an understanding of each other's professionals' roles, policies, resources, and limitations. Two, we found networks increase reporting of suspected cases. One way this happens is to embolden older adults and those that may care for them to come forward and report cases of abuse. Three, we found network participation enhances member skills and abilities to address financial exploitation. These experiences provide them with problem-solving skills and knowledge about a variety of topics, including how financial products and services work. Lastly, we found that networks leverage and save community resources through sharing, training, expertise, and education. Based upon these findings, we created a complement to that report with some voluntary recommendations for stakeholders who are interested in starting or enhancing a network. Here are some highlights of those recommendations, including conducting activities, engaging stakeholders, and delivering education. They center on things we found were most helpful in the network's activities. However, these recommendations are rather broad. So that led us to think about what more we could do. So in 2017, we began conducting pilot convenings, or a planning retreat, to seed network development. This allowed us to test different approaches and learn from doing what role we are best suited for. Also, it allowed us to develop a model for planning a retreat and engaging other local stakeholders in networks. In 2019, we released a summary of these convenings, covers is shown here. The summary expands on what we learned in these pilot retreat efforts, including what are their common activities, expanding networks, and bringing stakeholders together. We learned from conducting these pilots that the main role we could serve is to create a program to make starting and sustaining a network as easy as possible. Therefore, earlier this year, we released our web-based Elder Fraud Prevention and Response Networks Development Guide. This is a screenshot of the URL and the page here. We did this because we realized many stakeholders are eager to collaborate, but the time to create a successful effort is not as easily found. A turnkey development guide would be a very helpful resource for these people. As well, our understanding from a wide perspective of networks can help serve as a source of suggested practices to one another. The development guide focuses on 4 distinct areas of development. The first is planning a retreat. The guide helps users understand what to consider in preparing for and thinking about the retreat. The second is hosting a retreat. How you conduct a retreat can set the tone for the network. Our guide includes suggestions on how to provide opportunities for collaboration during the retreat. The third is establishing network priorities and working groups. After holding a retreat, it's important to bring community stakeholders back together to determine next steps and address priorities identified at the retreat. And the last is holding ongoing meetings and training. After a network is established and sets its priorities, the guide can provide ways to leverage working groups, engage the community, and grow their influence. Additionally, CFPB has other resources that networks can use in their community education efforts. Money Smart for Older Adults is an instructor-led curriculum, but can be used in a variety of ways. The content covers common financial issues facing seniors, including how to identify potential scams and frauds and other forms of exploitation. There are instructor and attendee guides, plus presentation slides for download. However, many organizations have found many other ways to use these materials. Our Protecting Residents Guide is useful for residential communities, helping their staff in the effort to counter elder financial exploitation and fraud. This guide's information, however, can be used to several settings where older adults might gather, including senior centers, places of worship, and healthcare settings. The cover of the report is shown here. And lastly, we have began what we call a placemat program. These are anti-fraud education efforts to assist meal delivery programs in their effort to stop elder financial exploitation and fraud. However, it's grown beyond that, and a variety of organizations have figured out ways to use these to help in their efforts to prevent fraud. One of our placemats is shown here without the language on it, I realize now, the wording, but in our materials you can find that. So now, this is the last of the slides. Just want to thank you for your time today. You can join our mailing list to receive occasional alerts about blog, network news, and funding opportunities at the email address and the URL here. I'm now going to turn it over to Daniel Dodd Ramirez.
Thank you, Michael. My name is Daniel Dodd Ramirez. I'm an assistant director here at the Bureau, and I'm fortunate to lead the Office of Community Affairs. Next slide, please. So here you see the statute, where we are in the statute. As one of the 4 special population offices, our office is really focused on helping low-income communities around the country. And you can see the language in the statute, which points out that our office was created in order to do that. Next slide, please. One of our priorities is to expand access to safe credit products, especially for consumers who are economically vulnerable. One of the early steps that we took in our office was to better understand the consumers who can benefit most from safe credit products. And to that end, the Bureau had previously conducted research to determine how many consumers are credit invisible, meaning they don't have credit scores. This research found 11% of consumers have no credit record with credit reporting agencies, and another 8% have a credit record that is too limited to score. 3% of consumers, about 45 million people, don't have a credit score, which can limit their opportunities in accessing credit, housing, and employment. If I could just remind people that to mute your lines because we're getting a bit of background from someone. It might be one of the other panelists, so please remember to mute. Once we learned the scope of the problem, we focused on how to help consumers. For people who are credit invisible, a key goal is to establish a credit score, preferably a good score, and consumers who already have credit may desire to maintain a good history or to rebuild their credit if they have damaged credit. This raises the question, what credit products and services can help consumers achieve these goals, especially helping the credit invisible consumers with safe on-ramps to credit? And that's what I'm going to be discussing here today. Next slide, please. First, before I get into that research, I do want to say a few words about our overall strategies to help consumers build, rebuild, and maintain good credit. We develop informational resources and tools about credit for consumers and also for the organizations that serve them, like financial educators. And I'll show you a few of those resources at the end of the presentation. We also work with local communities addressing credit invisibility by providing data and technical assistance to help communities who want to assist their residents in building credit. In addition, we develop strategic partnerships between nonprofits, industry, and local government to work on credit building issues. And lastly, we advance research on effective strategies around credit, and it's this last topic which I'm really going to focus on today. So, as I just mentioned, we want to better understand effective credit building products and strategies, and so we've conducted rigorous research into one promising product, credit builder loans. Before I tell you about our research about credit builder loans, let me just explain what they are, since they might not be familiar to some people. With credit builder loans, a financial institution deposits a small amount of money into a secured account. The borrower repays the money in small monthly on-time installments over a set period of time. The lender reports the payment history to the credit reporting agencies. At the end of the loan term, the lender deposits the principal payments into the borrower's savings account, either after each payment or in its entirety when the borrower completes the program. A borrower can't end up with an unpaid loan balance, which makes the credit builder loan a lower risk entry product, as well as a vehicle to build savings. At the end of the loan term, if the consumer makes payments on time, the consumer will have a positive trade line on their credit record, and this could help them to access other types of credit products as needed. So credit builder loans are one of those on-ramps to credit I mentioned earlier. Next slide, please. So we wanted to explore how well credit builder loans worked and for whom. We had some specific outcomes we wanted to learn about, which are listed here. We wanted to know, how does having a credit builder loan affect the situation of borrowers in terms of things like the likelihood of having a credit score and the actual credit scores of the borrowers? Is the borrower making payments on their other loans? And is there a change in savings balances for credit builder loan borrowers? Lastly, we want to know if credit builder loans are a better fit for some consumers than for other consumers. Next slide, please. So to explore these questions, we did an evaluation of a credit builder loan program. Note that the study I'm going to be describing was released yesterday and can be found on the Bureau's website. For this study, the product we studied was a standalone credit builder loan offered by a credit union. A consumer would sign up for a $600 loan plus a total of $48 in interest. It was paid back in 12 monthly payments of $54 each. As I described before, the consumer did not put up any money themselves, and the loan money was only released to the consumer as the payments were made. The payments were reported to the 3 major reporting agencies. This credit builder loan was a product already offered at a credit union in the Midwest. It was not created just for this study. And we used the gold standard of research, a randomized controlled trial that had an experimental and a control group. After people consented to participate in the study, their credit and savings were tracked for 18 months. Next slide, please. So we don't have a lot of time to get into all the detail that some folks might like about the research today, though, as I said before, you can find the details in the report that was just released yesterday on our Research and Reports tab on our website. But I am going to share the major findings now. First, we found that credit builder loans were more effective for people without existing debt. Just for borrowers without existing debt, opening a credit builder loan increased their likelihood of having a score by 24%, and it increased their average credit score by about 60 points. So as we had hoped, for those consumers, we did in fact see more people become credit visible, thereby building a credit history and improving their score if they already had a score. We found that having a credit builder loan increased average savings balances by $253. So some of the credit builder loan borrowers, as those loan funds were released to them, were leaving those funds in savings. And this is a great outcome. However, we also found that borrowers who had a lot of other existing debt sometimes struggled to incorporate the credit builder loan into their existing payment obligations. Those consumers did see the same increases in credit scores. Those consumers did not see the same increases in credit scores. And the hypothesis is that adding more debt obligations to people who had tight budgets led them to not making all payments on time, either the credit builder loan payment or other debt payments. Anecdotally, we heard that some borrowers even prioritized paying the credit builder loan over paying existing loan payments because they were so motivated to improve their credit. They didn't fully realize that not paying other debts could undermine the potential positive impact on their credit score from the credit builder loan. Now, keep in mind, this was a product that was offered through a financial institution where the folks are doing other financial business with people in the course of the day, the tellers and the other loan officers. Credit builder loans are offered through nonprofits that have a lot of wraparound services around financial education, and that would be a very different result. But this is the credit builder loan offered through this credit union. Next slide, please. So what can we take away from this study? Well, we've learned that credit builder loans work well when targeted to the right borrowers. So it's important to target credit builder loans to borrowers most likely to benefit, meaning consumers with thin or no credit histories and without a lot of the other existing debt. Second, it's important to help borrowers stay current on their credit builder loans and other debt obligations. This could be done through financial education or providing more information about money management and debt reduction to borrowers. This relates to the fourth bullet here. It could be helpful to connect credit builder loan borrowers in need of more support to wraparound services. Some consumers may need more support, like financial coaching, to help them succeed with credit builder loans. Lastly, we do see a lot of promise in using credit builder loans as a savings tool for people who want to build their savings while they build their credit. If these loans were marketed with that benefit emphasized, we think there's potential for this to be a very helpful savings tool for the consumer. Next slide, please. For my last few minutes, I want to quickly share a few of the resources that the CFPB has available on credit topics. First, I want to note that we have a lot of valuable resources for consumers who are impacted by the coronavirus pandemic. In fact, we have an entire section of our website devoted to this, as you can see in the screenshot from the website. Next slide, please. If you go to that page, you'll see that it covers a range of topics as shown on this slide. And note the bolded topic in the lower left, protecting your credit. Next slide, please. If you go to that protecting your credit page, you'll see that consumers can do things that consumers can do to make sure that their credit's not harmed to the extent possible by the financial issues related to COVID. This page also provides information on how hardship relief from lenders will be reported on consumers' credit histories. Next slide, please. In addition to the coronavirus resources I just mentioned, the Bureau also has a range of other resources on credit topics for consumers and for financial capability practitioners. This slide shows a small sample of some of the handouts and resources that we have available at consumerfinance.gov. In particular, note the Building Credit from Scratch one-pager you can see here in the upper right, which connects to the issue we've been discussing today, how to help people enter or re-enter the credit system in a positive way. Next slide, please. I'll end by saying a few words about one of the resources we have available, the One Credit to Work for You booklet. This is part of the suite of Your Money, Your Goals tools that we've developed. This is a colorful, plain language booklet that has 8 different tools which can be used to help consumers to learn about how to improve their credit. These booklets can be ordered for free through our website, and we encourage you to do so. So I'll stop here, but I'd be happy to talk more about the study or about any of the other resources and the questions and answers. And I'm going to hand things over to Althea, who will be moderating the next part. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Althea Corellis, and I'm the Associate Director for the Bureau's Office of Equal Opportunity and Fairness, and I'm moderating this session. My first question will go to both Jims, and they can decide who will respond from the presentation from the Office of Servicemembers Affairs. My question is, there are several other surveys of service members' financial well-being or financial literacy, which are conducted on a regular basis by the Department of Defense and other organizations. What is this research adding to the conversation?
Yeah, thanks. This is Jim Rice again. Those are great surveys, and I alluded to when I first started my discussion. A lot of those surveys are self-reported. Some of them are very good. They're longitudinal. They've been going on for a long time, and they are a great resource for tracking trends over time for those organizations like DoD, who have been doing that for a significant length of time. What I think our research adds to is putting data behind those various surveys. The research that we did in the credit records and matching those against the SCRA database takes a known population of service members and puts them against real-world facts and figures that show where they are. So I think the two work very well together in taking the data that we derive from the research and turning it into information so people can make that well-informed decision about what they're going to do. I think it adds to surveys like DoD's and others when they look at the products that they're developing to help the members of our community, whether they're active duty, reserve component, or veterans, when they're developing those products to help those populations, I think this research will help inform the development of those products.
Thank you, Jim. My next question is for Michael from the Office of Older Americans. So Michael, how can stakeholders plan and host a retreat considering the current circumstances with the pandemic? Michael?
Hi, I'm sorry. Yeah, when we released the guide, we were very cognizant of the current pandemic situation and realized that a lot of our stakeholders were very busy during that time. And as we've all learned lately, I think, a lot of planning and work can be implemented remotely via tele and video conferencing. In fact, most of the planning that we did for retreats was done by telephone meetings, some video. The actual retreats can take advantage of both advances in technology and I think people's familiarity with them. I know you wouldn't know it by my pause there being on mute, but I've learned a lot about technology lately and how to use these video conferencing systems. So I think a lot of the groups planning these and hosting these retreats could as well. This can also help support rural communities. We've heard from some stakeholders that trying to get people who are all stakeholders in elder financial exploitation prevention together looks a lot different in Chicago than it would western Nebraska. When the county is as big as a state, you know, sometimes it's very difficult for people to get together. So we think it can help with rural communities. It might help with situations where you might want to get one profession for all across the state together. So you might want every county office on aging to be on a call to describe what they do for a certain group. So that could be done by teleconferencing and video. And then bringing speakers from out of town. So we've found a lot of ways to utilize technologies. We are very interested in our office of seeking opportunities to pilot the use of the guide for a virtual online retreat. So if there are any groups out there that are saying, hey, you know, we can plan a retreat and we're actually interested in hosting a retreat as well, using the guide, doing it virtually, we would be interested in working with them so that we can learn what else we might be able to produce to make these retreats successful.
Thanks, Michael, for that response. My next question goes to Danielle from our Office of Community Affairs. Daniel, what is the relevance of the credit building in time when so many people have credit histories that are being damaged by lost income and financial challenges?
It's an excellent question. Clearly, for many people, they're struggling with the impact of the pandemic, lost job, income. Building credit is probably not going to be their top priority. Protecting their credit is probably where their focus is, and we understand that, and we have resources to help with that, as I mentioned in my presentation. For those of us who are providing services right now, we have to find that balance between helping people to manage their finances to stay afloat during the crisis, and at the same time, we also have to be thinking about what's next and planning for an ultimate recovery, which will include rebuilding credit again. That said, there will always be people newly entering the credit system. They're going to need products like credit builder loans. There are young people entering adulthood who need to establish credit history. And there are also people who haven't used credit in a while, but they may need access to credit now. And then there may be people that are impacted by the pandemic who stop using credit for a period of time while they get back on their feet. You know, when they're ready to use credit again, their credit history might be stale, meaning that it's not recent enough to be used to generate a credit score. So credit builder loans, you know, are a good way for those consumers to re-enter the credit system.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you, Daniel. My next question goes to either of the Jims. Jim, both of you will want to take this question. You mentioned groups that have more delinquencies or defaults than others. What groups are those, and do you know why they have higher delinquency rates?
Okay, thanks for that question. You briefly touched on it in the on delinquencies in the short presentation that Jim did today. But I think you'll see in the larger report, in the full report, and even somewhat in the summary, that there is good news and bad news. So it's the delinquencies may stick out for folks who want to look at the bad news, and I can give you an example of that. But there is good news as well, and the good news is that service members who stay longer, who are 3 years and longer, tend to do better overall in their credit histories compared to the general population. So there is a good news story in there. But the question was about delinquencies, and I'll give you an example, and it is one of the big findings, I think, of the report is that those service members who stay only between a year and 2.5 years, that particular population, has problems with things like revolving credit after they depart the service. And you'll see that both in this report and in the follow-on report that Jim alluded to.
Thank you. My next question is for Michael. Michael, How does the guide help community stakeholders?
Yes, the guide, I think, can serve as a focal point for stakeholders who are interested in this issue of elder financial exploitation and helping to prevent and respond to cases of it. It's an effective way to rally people. It's something that you can commonly discuss, commonly follow, commonly look at and see examples of other instances where networks have been formed or enhanced. So we've wanted to make it, again, like I said, as easy as possible. So we have suggested agendas for the meeting, suggested invitation lists, worksheets to work through that you can download and use during the retreat, the planning retreat for those networks. We're going to be adding things over time. We're going to be hosting webinars, so there might be a chance for peer-to-peer learning. And we're going to put those findings then again into the guide. So I think it can be a continuing, ongoing resource. It gives people something sort of, I'm saying virtual, but at the same time tangible, because we are going to have a print version of it, but it's something that they can look to and see commonly, what is this thing that we are thinking about and talking about, and then possibly move forward together on a unified agenda.
Thank you. Daniel, this is your question. What are other products and services that can help consumers without a credit history become credit visible?
There are a lot of things out there, and we're always interested in learning more about other products out there. But let me just mention a few. But feel free to reach out to us if you have other products and that you want to let us know about. So, obviously one option is a secured credit card. With secured credit card, when you're approved, you can deposit an amount of money which can range from $50 to $300 into a separate account. The bank holds on to the deposit and extends a credit line, matching the deposit amount. And I remember my own, when I first got involved, my first credit card was through a retail chain. So, there are a lot of gas stations out there, department stores, retail chains that offer credit cards. And probably a lot of us remember, getting our first card through a department store. These cards tend to be easier to obtain, typically offer lower credit lines. This combination makes them an option when you're looking to build up, thin or non-existent credit record. And then something to keep in mind is some consumers co-sign a loan with someone, often a family member or someone who had a credit history, in order to start building their own credit record. So there are just a few options, but again, we know that there are a lot of other things out there, and we're happy to learn and talk with more organizations or individuals about what you see within your communities.
Thank you, Daniel, for that. My next question goes to Jim again. Jim, the service branches reformed their financial literacy training a couple of years ago. Are those changes reflected in this report? And if not, how might it change the results?
The short answer is that those changes are not reflected in this report. In order to get the cohort that we wanted to study, the data actually cuts off prior to the implementation of some of those DoD changes. In fact, prior to any of those DoD changes. The good news story there is that if we continue this research, we'll go from this base, we will cover that population that will show where these changes have been made, and although there won't necessarily be a direct correlation, we will be able to see somewhat clearly where changes are made in various areas of instruction and see if there is improvement in the various cohorts that we study.
Thank you, Jim.
And before I turn over the mic, I should have said up front, I need to recognize a couple of folks, Patrick Brick from our office, who helped oversee the production of the report from its very inception, and the Bureau's Office of Research, who were instrumental in keeping us straight in our research methods. We would not have been able to get the report out without either of those entities.
Great, thank you. Thanks for recognizing them. My next question goes to Michael. And Michael, how can the guide help an existing network?
So for existing networks, we've had the experience where our involvement helps to act as a catalyst because the CFPB, which a lot of financial institutions and aging services organizations, because of our office, were familiar with, we were able to help kind of revive and bring them back together. They had been suffering from, they had been less active than they had hoped in the more recent past. So our involvement helped to revive that a bit, and I think the guide could serve that as, here's something new, here's a new way for us to approach the network's work. They might be able to use it even, we've talked to some networks who said they wanted to replicate what they were doing. They felt they were successful in their county in the state, but they wanted to see other counties in the state create a network like this, you know, a senior coalition or something. So they would be able to, instead of just trying to describe what they were doing to others, again, could very easily say, and here's a playbook for you, and provide that to other jurisdictions in their surrounding communities. As you know, fraud doesn't stop at the county border, and exploitation is not going to stop at the county border, so a lot of times it would be very helpful to spread that as widely as possible. And I think it can also show an existing network some possibly just a few new stakeholders that they may not have thought of in the past. We're identifying, and some of them may have kind of brought in, but for example, emergency technicians often are the very first people that see any signs of abuse, because they are going into the home where that older person resides for a medical or emergency. You know, the person has quote unquote fallen, but they may just sense something's wrong in a financial, so there's something not right about the situation. The caregiver is not allowing them to speak. They are doing all the speaking for the person that's fallen. I noticed there are other issues. So emergency technicians might be a group to bring into the network, and that so as we provide more examples of things, I think we can show how existing networks could benefit from our guide, and then use it to achieve any goals they might have for their own jurisdictions or more widely.
Thank you for that. So Daniel, I have a question for you on credit builder loans. Specifically, the research suggests that the credit builder loan may not be the best product for people with damaged credit. What options exist for consumers who need to rebuild their credit?
That's right. Thank you for the question. And just to remind folks that this is this was a product that was off the shelf within a financial institution, in this case a credit union. Credit builder loans that are offered through nonprofits with lots of wraparound services that are really, baking in financial education and financial coaching every step of the way. It's a very different outcome. This was not that kind of research. So I just want to remind folks as far as the context. There are some general ways to improve your credit. Clearly, it's tough right now during a pandemic. People are losing. It's hard to maintain good credit. People are having trouble paying bills. It's important to reach out to lenders to ask for hardship relief. More generally, there are things that consumers can do to improve their credit over time, like paying your bills on time every time. On time means the payment gets to the company the day the bills due. Mail your bills a few days before they're due. That's one tip. And we've got also a lot of information on our webpage within Your Money, Your Goals as far as managing, prioritizing those bills and helping you to come up with those determinations of which bills to pay first and things like that. Another tip is not to get too close to your credit limit. Credit scores consider how close you are to being maxed out on credit cards. If you use too much of your available credit, you can hurt your credit score. Experts advise using no more than 30% of your available credit, and some even say you should use less than 10%. Another tip is not to apply for too much credit in a short time. Your credit score may go down if you apply for or open a lot of new accounts in a short time. This includes getting a new card so you can transfer balances, so keep that in mind. Or opening up a new store account so you can get a discount. So keep that in mind too. If you pay with a credit card, pay your balance off every month. Pay off your balances in full each month to avoid paying finance charges. Paying your balance each month can also help better build credit than carrying a balance. Of course, this is very challenging, especially for lower income households. But again, we're talking, ideally. And then, of course, something that we can all do, which is to check your credit report and to fix those errors right away. It might feel a little complicated at the beginning, but the more you do it, the easier it gets, the easier it is to get familiar with that language on your credit report and to fix those errors and to stay on top of those and be checking those on a regular basis. And we know now, thanks to the credit bureaus, that we can, pull those credit reports even more frequently, free of charge, because of the situation we've been in the country.
Thanks, Daniel. I have one more question for you. So how does your office help other economically vulnerable populations in addition to the credit invisible?
We have a lot of other programs and efforts to help populations, such as disadvantaged youth, low and moderate income families that are eligible for the earned income tax credit and other public benefits. Your Money, Your Goals has some special companion guides that are helpful, hopefully, with lots of tools for people with disabilities, Native populations, and people reentering into the population from incarceration. To give a couple of other examples, we've got an employment success program that helps job training programs prepare young adults for the key financial decisions that come with their first paycheck. Our Tax Time Savings Initiative assists programs that prepare taxes, help their clients to save part of their tax refunds. And again, our Your Money, Your Goals suite of resources for social workers includes those special guides that I mentioned before. So, do reach out and take a look on the webpage at the other offices. And if you have any input or ideas of other things that we could be doing, please feel free to reach out to us.
Thank you, Daniel, for that. That was very informative. I have one more question, and that goes to Michael before we wrap up. So, Michael, you talked about the guide. How does that support the sustainability of a network?
Yes, and Jim was acted as a good example in thanking his staff, and I want to thank our staff. Jennifer Duane is the project lead. Kate Kramer did a good bit of the writing, Hector in the research, so all of our team together did a fantastic job. So I want to make sure that everybody knows how appreciative we are of their work. As for sustainability, I think one of the key things we are able to do is to show networks other related resources, even beyond ours, so that if they might grow, let's say that they start off just doing mostly education and our resources really help them come together as a team, but they want to form a case review team. We work with the Department of Justice. They have an Elder Justice Initiative, so they have a guide on creating an elder abuse case review team and process. The Department of Justice Office for Victims of Crime does grant funding for various elder justice issues, including things like networks. So as those networks, we want to do more or something else. If we're not focused on it, we're quite aware and can point and help keep things going for them, sustaining by all those other resources that we're familiar with.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So, Desmond, I want to turn this back over to you. And as we wrap up, I would like to ask, how do you see all of this work folding together? How do these individual programs fit into the Bureau's overall strategy for consumer education?
Thank you, Althea, and I just want to thank everybody for joining us today again, and thank the panelists, Michael, Jim, Daniel, and James, for a fantastic presentation, everybody. As I mentioned before at the top of my presentation, we see the work in consumer education as providing resources, skill-building tools to consumers so that they can take charge of their financial lives. We are also working aggressively to create infrastructure or strengthen the infrastructure of consumer financial education around the country by providing tools like the ones that Daniel and information like Jim and Michael provide today. And we see this as just a small sampling of the fantastic tools and resources that are available on our website, where consumers can not only come to submit complaints to us regarding financial institutions that they might be having a challenge with, There are lots of tools that consumers can download to use in their day-to-day managing of their finances. But equally as important, we are providing resources and tools to intermediaries that are serving consumers. We know many consumers go to local community-based organizations for support, and we want to equip those individuals that are serving those families with the types of easy, readily available, accurate information that they can share with their clients. And as we are doing in the COVID-19 response, based on the information that we're putting out right now, we are constantly listening to consumers, constantly listening to those who serve consumers to make sure that we can be responsive to get information out that are timely, information that consumers can use, and information that's relevant in terms of their day-to-day situation. That's the way we see the work within our office, and we strongly encourage you to visit our website, consumerfinance.gov, to not only look at all of the resources that are there, download materials, and order materials that might be of use to you and your community. Again, really thank the panelists for their presentations today. Thank you, Athea, for so adeptly managing us through this session. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this afternoon, and look forward to our ongoing work with you. Please visit the Bureau's website.